Hi everyone, so welcome to another episode where I will be continuing the OWASP Top 10. In the last lesson, we did something on injection, insecure design, and security misconfiguration. For this lesson, we'll continue with vulnerable and outdated components, and then we'll move slowly to identification and authentication failure. I think that will be all for this episode, and then I'll just briefly explain the remaining part of the top 10 and wrap up the series on OWASP Top 10. So stay tuned. So like I said, we'll be dealing with vulnerable and outdated components. And lastly, I'll be looking into identification and authentication failure. And I would also explain the few other parts, even though we'll not go into their labs, and I'll wrap up the series with this episode. So I will be sharing my screen. So I'm sharing my screen from here. As you can see, we have gone through the labs for, broken access control, cryptographic failure, injection, insecure design, and security misconfiguration. Now we'll go into the lab of vulnerable and outdated components. If you have been following my channel, you'd understand what vulnerable and outdated components really means. So it means that you, maybe on your application, you have a part of it or all of it that have been outdated, that you have an update version, but you have not really updated the application or whatever it is, and it's now vulnerable. So for example, a company did not update their WordPress for a few years, and when you look at using a tool like WordPress Scan, you will see that their version is 4.6. and it reviews, and quick research would review that 4.6 is vulnerable to unauthenticated RCE, remote code execution exploits. So there is a database that you can use to check these exploits. I'll be showing that database when we get into the lab, but this is just an example to show you that maybe a company is using a particular application that they've not updated for a long period of time, and then this application is now vulnerable, which would make it prone to attack, from attackers. So we have read this part. Now let's go into what the exploit looks like. As you can see from the screen that we're trying to find an exploit. This is the name of the application, this is the version, this is the software, this is the version. And so we're trying to look for whether this is vulnerable. So the first thing we want to do is to start our machine. Once we start our machine, I'll be able to start the attack box. And then I would quickly go back to the exploit. So now we know, what we're looking for. In some cases, we'll just be provided with the software and the version, or we run some command to see the version. As you can see in the previous labs, we did look for a version somewhere using cat/etc/os-release to see the version. So in this case, we already have the software, we already have the version. So we'll be checking this exploit database to see if there's something on it. And remember that we are in this lesson and in this exploit, we are more focused on, unauthenticated remote code execution and something around remote code execution. So in this case also, we are looking for remote code execution. Like you can see in the image, I'd like to show this exploit first before we then go into the lab that we are supposed to solve. So I'll be showing you how this exploit looks like. I'm just waiting for this machine to be up. And so from this exploit on this database, we can already download the Python document that contains the exploit, would have it in. Once we have it in and we correct some errors on it, we'll just run this command. And once we run the command, we'll be able to see that now, the exploit is visible, right? And then we will use this same way to actually open up the exploit for our own lab also. But, enough of talking, and let's go to exploits database. So I'm just copying the link, and then I'm using Firefox rather. Paste the link in, and we'll see how it looks like. So this is how the database looks like. Then we can use the name of the software to search. So sometimes when you are doing research about it to see whether an application is vulnerable, you could also check something like this for educational purpose only. You could also check something like this just to see if there's something on exploit database. So because this is the one we are interested in, and this is the exploit itself, we can download it from here. So let's say we download the exploit. We'll see it downloaded. Now it's downloaded. It's a Python file. And we can now go into the terminal to run that command. So because it's a Python file, we can use Python, to run the command on that file. You can see the name of the file is 47837.py. So if we run it, it will come back with an error that something is wrong, that we need to, comment out. Like you can see, something is not defined, so we need to comment it out. From their explanation here, you see this line needs to be commented. So because the line needs to be commented, we can just nano and go to the file again. Like I mentioned that you can use nano as an editor in previous lesson. So you can nano and go into the file. As you can see, this is what they are referring to, the CVE 2019. So you just need to scroll there and comment it out. And what does it mean to comment it out? Just add an hash and you've commented it out. Now you need to save it. So Control O, OK, and Control Exit, then you're back. So it's saved correctly now. And if you run it as Python, and then add your host, as you can see from the screen, your local host is what you need to add in this case. Sorry. I did it even without adding the local host, to be honest. So, and here we go. So we have the result. Yeah, we have the result. And so because we have been able to achieve it with this example, we'll then, click complete because we don't need anything. Now we'll go into our lab. So in the lab, they ask us to navigate to this page, and I will open the. Now it's very simple this way I'm explaining it, but is normally added than this when you don't know what you're looking for. Here we have an idea. We know that this application is vulnerable. We already know that it's a vulnerable application. Normally you should be testing to see if it's vulnerable, but in this case you already have an idea that it's vulnerable. Now we need to check this on exploit database in relation to anything that has remote code execution. Remember, this is our focus mainly. This is our focus. So I would be using different keyword. You can use something like online bookstore. And I think when I decided to use online bookstore, I didn't see anything related. So I decided to space out, bookstore, and then checking through to see if I can see anything related to remote code execution. This is where it is. From this point, this tick actually show that they verified this exploit. This times shows that it's yet to be verified. So we are good with this one because it's also verified. Even if it's not verified, I think a lot of people are working on the database. So we download this also. as a file. Now, again, like we did initially, we'll go to our terminal. We already know the name of the file, so we'll go to our terminal and we input the name of the file. In case you don't know the name of the file, that's fine. You can always ls and try to see the name of the file. I showed you what ls means. So as you can see, we have two files. The first one was the one we initially used for the exploit. Now the second one is the one we just downloaded. So if you use the same command, let's see what this has to be. Okay, so we need to put the URL of the website. Remember, I was trying to add the host at some point, but we didn't need it. Now we need to actually put this URL. I'll copy it. We need to actually add it to be able to access that exploit. So now we have it, and it's asking whether we want to launch the shell. We say yes. Now we have an error. And because this room is actually not a very recent room, so I was having this error and trying to see how to get by. But then I discovered that we don't actually have to use just Python. Python 3 would work better actually. So I added 3 to this, and then it's asking for yes or no. Of course it's yes. And then the shell is launched. So with this remote code execution means that you can just input code that would remotely execute itself. So in this case, they said we should look for the content of this file. This is a file that we can access through this shell. So they said we should look for the content. Remember, I told you what cats can do. Cats can display things. Remember that I mentioned that cats can display things. Nano can edit things. So with cats, I can easily just go into that directory and see what is inside. And as you can see, I already have my flag. It's that simple. If it's a whole bunch of lot of things, then maybe you can also search through to see where your flag is. And as simple as that, we already have our flag. Now that lab is done, and let's go to identification and authentication failures. If you are again also following my lesson, you will have an idea what identification and authentication failure means. Identification is your username, password. Authentication is, okay, the system is checking. Does this user actually, is this user actually a valid user? And then the last one, authorization, is, okay, what can the user do? I had explained these 3 concepts before in the past. So authorization is, can the user log in? What else can they do? Can they make purchases? Can they log in as admin or not? If it's a no, then the authorization will fail, that kind of thing. So there are 3 concepts: identification, authentication, and authorization. So they were trying to, explain different attacks that could occur when there is a flaw in authentication mechanism. So we have the brute force attack, use of weak credentials when people are using common password. We have weak session cookie where attackers can actually steal your cookie and all of those. Now that's what the authentication mechanism is trying to explain. So let's go into what it could mean when there is a failure. Now in real life, you would have to be checking for different things. Now this is a room lab that is already structured in a way. But if you're trying to check if an application or a website have identification and authentication failure, that means you would have to check for different things, just random things that you think might pass through, just to be sure, until you see that, okay, there is a flaw in this application thereabout. So we are going to be using this website. I would be logging. I would add it to the browser and see. So this is what it looks like. It's just a built up, and they said learn about attacking authentication. Now we want to use it to attack authentication, and they said try to register with Daring as a username. So here by default we see sign in, we see register. They say we should register with Daring. So I'll just come up with random stuff for the email and the password. Let's say I want to use CBEX at gbi.I, whatever. And then I want to use a password that I think would be nice. And then what this, it returns an error that the user already exists. Now, this is not a very good way to return error. Like I mentioned initially, that error message have to be very, very generic in order for attackers not to pick information from there. From this information, we already know that Daring actually exists on the platform. Now it exists, right? Okay, let's try to register with, as you can see with what they're asking us, a space before Daring to see if that goes well. So a space before Daring, I'll just use another email, random email or something. Then I would also use a password. Now, not now. So space Daring already registered successfully. Now they say, what is the flag that you can find in their account? So let's try to log in into space Daring, and I would put the password that I created for it and see if we're able to log into the account. It's so simple. We're able to log into the account. Now, in this case, we shouldn't be able to access Daring's account, really, but we are able to, because there is an authentication failure, right? And if we use the same trick, if we use the same space trick to actually see if we can log into Arthur's account. So again, I'll go through the same thing, the exact same thing. Log out and then try to register with Arthur's account. We can check that an account like that actually exists. So I will just use, a random email one more time, and then I would fix a password here, just random password, and see if this user already exists. Now the website, told us that the user is already registered. So in that case, we can try to register, a space before the name, and just put a random email again, and then random password like I mentioned before. Sorry, to be sure of the password so that we can use it to log in. So random. Now they've successfully registered this. Let's now log in with that account. So space Arthur, then the password. Now we have a flag in Author's account, and I will just copy it and then paste it here and submit. Let's see. Oh, we already, finished that lab. They are very simple. Now we have, 3 more OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities that I won't be going into. I'll just briefly explain them. Like I mentioned when the series started, there is a software and data integrity failure, there is security login and monitoring failure, and the last one is server-side request forgery. So software and data integrity failure, you already know what integrity means. It means that, a data is passing through unmodified. So when there is a failure, it means that it is actually modified. That's what the failure is actually trying to, talk about. So they started also with what is integrity. So when you can access things and you can modify them, then there is a failure. So security login and monitoring failure, and this part is, I mentioned in last class about threat modeling and that we are checking for repudiation. So repudiation, one of the core fundamentals of cybersecurity is non-repudiation. So it means that we make sure that the system operates in a way that nobody can actually deny that they've performed an action. So when there is repudiation, when we are checking for repudiation in threats modeling, we are trying to see if a user can perform an action and there is no trail for it. So when there is a security login and monitoring failure, it means that an attacker can actually get into your system, perform different action without leaving a trail. And they do it a lot. Get into your system, don't leave a trail, and they start to do C2C, like, command and control in your system without leaving a trail, that kind of thing. So that's when login and monitoring failure, actually happens. So the monitoring is not properly logging all of the action they are performing, the login details maybe to the SEM tool is not properly, getting all the information. So server-side request forgery also is when an attacker is imputing a script that gets a resource from the server, something around that. So I hope that this lesson has been very useful to somebody, and then see you next time.